Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on The Story Within, we retell those moments honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The strand was the color of sunlight on wheat, too bright, too young to belong to me. I noticed it because the drain in my hall bathroom kept sighing and pooling around my ankles, and because on Tuesdays I cleaned the way nurses prep an operating table, careful, methodical, a little stern. I'd just finished wiping the mirrors when the stopper gave a stubborn burp. I pulled on rubber gloves, knelt on the bath mat, and fished. Out came the usual sad bouquet soap film, a gray twist of my own hair, a sliver of the lavender bar my sister insists I use. Then looped delicately through the mess, that gleaming filament, long champagne blonde, too silky to be natural. I pinched it between thumb and forefinger and held it up to the light. It glittered. My name is Evelyn Hart, 69 widow for 17 years, and I am not sentimental about plumbing. But as I coiled that hair onto a tissue, I felt the old hush inside me, the one that follows a door slamming in a house you thought was empty. I pressed the tissue flat, folded it twice, and slid it into the velvet drawer of my vanity between a pearl pin and a bundle of letters that haven't been opened in a decade. My late husband Daniel taught me to keep records. Facts, he said once disentangling a fishing line, are kinder than guesses. Charles Reed had left my condo before sunrise to meet his Tuesday group, the fellows he called the men who wore sports caps, and argued tenderly about scores as if numbers were a language more reliable than feelings. They played 9 holes when the weather cooperated and billiards when it didn't. He'd kissed my cheek in the dark, his breath warm with mint, promised to bring back eggs, and cut tulips from the farmer's stand on Old Quarry Road. We'd gotten to that convenient, forgiving stage where both of us kept extra toothbrushes in each other's places, and no one checked a calendar before spending the night. I finished scrubbing open the windows and let late morning air rattle the blinds. At the kitchen table, the crossword weighted the cheap local paper I pretend to despise but buy anyway for the obituaries and the icebox pies in the back pages. I hovered over 7 across A Woman Who Deceives. My pen hesitated, then moved on. I didn't like the question yet. At 1, Charles came whistling up the corridor with reusable bags and tulips in a sleeve of paper like a brown cuff. Terrible round, he said cheerfully, wrestling the milk into the fridge. Cal's pudding was a menace. I should fire my driver. You could fire your friends, I said, not looking up. Less paperwork. He laughed, kissed the top of my head, and admired the clean bathroom on his way to wash his hands. The pang that followed was small but sharp. If he noticed the drain ran better, he didn't say. That evening, after salmon and a salad he claimed to despise but always finished, he mentioned Lila Monroe. Saw her at Hollander's, he said, cutting his fish into neat, serious squares. Looked tired. That flower shop must keep long hours. Lila never looks tired, I said, because for 41 years I have known the faces she shows the world. She and I raised children at the same block parties, buried men within 2 winters of each other, and once held hands through an ice storm that took the power and left us laughing in coats by the stove flame. She's always worn her hair a righteous auburn Monroe red, we called it when we were young enough to tease. She could use some cheer, Charles said. You should call her. He said it kindly. He says most things kindly. I smiled and started the dishwasher and told myself that kindness is a veil anyone can borrow when they need to step past the guard. He fell asleep to the late-game TV light, combing his face in bands. I sat at the kitchen counter with the tablet I rarely remember to charge. I typed Lila's name into the app we all pretend we don't check and watched a river of small declarations scroll by, bouquets arranged like ballerinas' centerpieces stubbornly taller than is practical, captioned with her tidy humor. 2 weeks back, Romanelli's on 7th, who knew Tuesday could feel like Saturday. The photo was candlelit, the table crowded with plates you don't order when you're alone. The shadow opposite her glass was bulky, the shoulder of a man who sits forward to listen. A week ago, new cut, new color. Lighter feels lighter. The selfie staggered me. The auburn was gone. In its place, a clever, expensive blonde, honeyed and bright, brushed into sleek waves that framed her cheekbones as if someone had commissioned them. Lila, who never once in 4 decades had changed her shade for fashion, smiled back at me like a woman stepping into a different house. In the bathroom, I took the tissue from the vanity and laid the strand beside the tablet. Under the vanity bulb, the color matched both a warm, bottled sunshine, both wrong in my tiled room. I slept poorly, a thin, papery sleep. In the morning, sunlight pooled on the rug like a blessing I didn't trust. I dialed Lila at 10. Lunch, I said brightly, like we were 29 and the day was a sweater we'd try on together. She picked Wren and Willow, a street corner cafe with checkered cloths and teacups that looked like heirlooms. She arrived late, breathless, her handbag like a small pet tugging at her elbow. The hair was even more luminous in person, cleverly threaded with paler filaments that caught the window's spill of light. She hugged me, then touched her crown as if to check it was still there. "Look at you," I said, and meant it. She did look like a woman who had stepped out of a draft and closed the door behind her. I needed a change, she said, cheeks pink. 67 is too young to disappear. We ordered. I chose the chicken salad I've loved since 1985. She asked for coffee only. The server set down water. Her glass trembled. I watched her tuck a napkin under the cup with the care of someone beginning to practice control. How's your breathing? I asked. Lila's been diabetic since the girls were in braces, a fact that arranges her day like a metronome. Eat, check, eat. Oh, I had a late breakfast, she said too quickly. You know how it is. I do, I said, and let the quiet between us thicken. Outside, a bus wailed like a gossip. Somewhere a spoon chimed against glass. And Charles, she asked at last, you two still doing those Sunday puzzles? Always, I said, though he cheats by reading the clues out loud to make them less mysterious. I sipped, then added, he keeps a tidy routine. Tuesday mornings with the fellows, groceries, home by 2:30. He's punctual enough to set a clock. Her smile fit badly as if borrowed. Predictable can be nice. It can, I said. It can also be a costume. She glanced down at her hands. Her nails were painted a careful shell pink Lila has always favored for weddings and job interviews. She twisted the ring finger bare now where her marriage had once held its small son. She looked up with the suddenness of someone leaping from a pier. Evie, are you? She stopped, swallowed. Is everything all right? Everything is as it is, I said. I found a long blonde hair in my shower drain yesterday. She inhaled too sharp to be casual, too soft to be shock. People who sell flowers for a living are good at arranging their faces. She managed a little laugh, airy and forgettable. That high-rise of yours has a million vents. Something could have floated in. You're thinking of how dust behaves, I said. Hair is heavier. It prefers the company of soap. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup until the china light as a sparrow clicked against its saucer. I'm not sure I like what you're implying. I'm not implying, I said gently. I'm noticing. Her eyes shone. For a second, I imagined all the versions of us, young, middle-aged, old, stacked like transparencies almost lining up. Then she reached into her bag for gum she didn't chew, dabbed her temple with a tissue she didn't need, and stood. I should get back to the shop, she said. Funeral spray for the Lehmans. They were in this morning. I nodded. The lilies will make it look like sunrise. She threw me a look I couldn't name. Maybe it was thanks, maybe something brittle. She left 2 bills under her cup, though she hadn't eaten, and the bell on the door rang twice as if it couldn't decide whether she was arriving or leaving. In the quiet that followed, I wrote adulteress into 7 across and hated myself for the satisfaction of the letters fitting. I erased it and replaced it with siren. Then I erased that and left it blank. All afternoon I did the familiar things, laundry, wiping the fridge shelves, pruning basil that had gone leggy under my ignorance. The body likes tasks that make visible sense, but a thought kept stitching its way through the hours. There are many languages you can pretend not to speak until someone insists on fluency. I have spent much of my life fluent in other people's comfort. At 4, I went to Walker's Pharmacy where the clerk recognizes me by the way I line my items like dominoes. I walked the beauty aisle with a concentration that would shame a surgeon. Between waxing strips and a row of mint green jars sat the quiet army I was looking for, depilatories, their labels whispering warnings to impatient girls. I chose a brand I didn't know and a formula that promised results for coarse, stubborn hair. In my cart, I placed a bottle of charcoaled shampoo, pricey masculine, the sort of thing that addresses itself to men as if they need a pep talk to wash. Back home, the late light had the thin, brittle quality of pages near the back of a book. I carried my bag into the guest bath, the one Charles uses because he likes the water pressure, and set everything on the edge of the sink. I unscrewed the cap from his graphite black shampoo, breathed in its expensive forest, and poured it slow and steady down the drain. The scent rose and then was gone. When the bottle was empty, I rinsed it, shook it dry, and filled it to the shoulder with the cream, whose label advised caution. The cream smelled faintly of hospitals. I masked it with 2 tablespoons of an older shampoo from under my sink, one I keep for nieces who visit with glitter in their hair. I swirled the mixture until it looked convincingly pearled. I wiped the threads of the cap. I returned the bottle to the exact ring it had printed on the tile. I straightened the shower caddy so its wire looked deliberately careless. I folded the towel end even with the stripe. Then I washed my hands twice and sat at the kitchen table where the crossword waited with its small black doors. The window admitted a breeze that smelled like cut grass and something sharper I couldn't name. I wrote my name at the top of the grid not because crosswords require signatures, but because I wanted to see the letters together plain and whole. EVELY NHART. Facts, I thought, are kinder than guesses. And still sometimes you need a test. Morning arrived with a clean and different light that flattened the kitchen, into shapes the square of the table, the silver line of the sink, the upright note of a single tulip Charles had cut too short and wedged into a juice glass. I buttered toast and waited for the pipes to sing. They did the way they always did when someone opened the guest bath, first a cough, then a steady throat clearing that meant the shower had found itself. Steam drifted down the hallway, thick with the resinous scent of his graphite black shampoo. Then the scent changed an antiseptic whisper that didn't belong in my condo. I turned the toast face down on a plate and listened to the small and steady sounds of a man touching his head as if the skull were a map he'd never read carefully. Water off, silence. Water on, again hotter this time, silence. The soft slap of a towel. He came out in his robe skin pinked by the shower hair combed in its usual careful part. "Forgot to pick up the good marmalade," he said, voice too bright. "Set me back a whole decade." "There's honey," I said, sliding the plate toward him. "And last week's jam if you feel sentimental." He laughed, then lifted his hand halfway to his crown as if pulled by a string. The gesture stopped midair. He sat. He buttered. He did not eat. After breakfast, he fiddled with his phone, announced he had errands. Kissed my knuckles and left. I walked the hall, closed the bathroom door, and turned on the light. In the mirror, the room looked exactly as I'd left it. Towels folded like composed thoughts, the metal caddy squared to the tile seam, the shampoo bottle casually leaning utterly ordinary. I felt nothing triumphant, only the odd steadiness that comes when the facts line up on their own. The day rearranged itself into chores and then into a long afternoon. Lila's shop posted a picture of red ranunculus in blue glass. A caption: "Some days need color you can hold." I read it twice and decided it wasn't meant for me. Charles reappeared before dinner, hatless, smiling, the expression stretched a hair too tight. "Chinese," he asked. "I'm craving ginger." "Order what you like," I said. "I'll make rice." He peeled an orange while he waited for the restaurant to answer the rind coming off in one perfect coil that he laid on the counter like a small orange continent. When he hung up, he stared at the coil as if it might point him north. "You ever notice," he said lightly, "how the simplest things are the hardest to repeat?" "Every day," I said. He showered again after his run to pick up food unusual for him on a weeknight. The water ran longer. I heard the cabinet door open and close as if he were searching for some forgotten miracle in a bottle. At the table, he kept sweeping his hair with the flat of his palm, testing for reassurance, finding none. "You're distracted," I said. "The golfer's curse," he said, forcing a grin. "Testing the swing long after the game is over." "You'll sprain your thoughts," I said. "Eat." We ate. We did not talk much. He fell asleep early in my chair neck, bent in a way that would scold him tomorrow. I covered him with the throw and turned off the lamp. In the quiet, I considered the day and felt it settle in layers, what I had seen, what I had done, what I could bear. By morning, his vigilance had curdled into alarm. He called from the bathroom in a voice pitched just below panic. "Evie, do you have a different conditioner? Mine feels, wrong." "I keep extras under the sink," I said, standing in the doorway. He was bareheaded, hair damp, and trying to lie flat. It refused in irregular places. If you didn't know him, you might not see it. I knew him. "Maybe I'm shedding," he said, peering forward. "Is that a thing at my age?" "You lost a few after the holidays," I said, which was both true and irrelevant. By 10, his phone buzzed. He checked the message, then blinked as if something bright had struck him. "Monroe says brunch Sunday news to share." She wrote it like a headline. "She invites me as well." She wrote, "You too." He tried to sound amused and landed near anxious. "Funny, right?" "Very," I said. "Say yes." He said yes, thumb hovering longer than necessary. Saturday was bright with that early autumn clarity that makes edges seem honest. He showered twice. The second time, when the water stopped, I heard the dry rasp of his fingers working through hair to find what wasn't there. He came to the bedroom in a towel and stood at the dresser, parted and reparted, trying angles. In the mirror, the thinning showed itself like a rumor that has decided to be a fact. "Does it look different?" he asked. "It looks like it needs a hat," I said. He stared, then huffed a laugh, and then the small stunned pause of a man, realizing the laugh hasn't dissolved the fear. He put on a cap, took it off, put it on again. "I've got a thing at the club," he said. "I'll be back in a few hours." "A thing," I repeated. Men have things, he said with a weak charm that would have worked before. "Don't be late," I said. He wasn't late. He was early and quietly frantic. He went straight to the mirror, lifted his cap, and inhaled through his nose like someone bracing for a cold pool. The bare irregularities had multiplied small, ghostly patches that didn't obey any map. Watching him, I felt a movement inside me I didn't recognize at first. It was not satisfaction. It was not pity. It was a kind of adjusting, like slipping a picture in its frame so the horizon runs level. He kept the cap on for dinner. I asked nothing. At 9, I said I was tired. In bed, I lay awake, listening to his breath as it stuttered, paused, resumed. Twice he rose and padded to the bathroom. Twice I heard the low, astonished murmur of someone learning his own body has other plans. Sunday began with the sun nosing through the blinds, and Charles standing at the mirror so close his breath fogged the glass. He called me by the wrong name and corrected himself. Evelyn, look. I joined him. The thinness had deepened overnight. The effect was not dramatic, only undeniable. Perhaps stress, I said softly. Stress, he repeated. From what? Routine can be heavy, I said, even when it's a habit we love. He lowered his cap brim. We should cancel. We should not disappoint our hostess. He flinched almost imperceptibly at our. He drove. He didn't turn on the radio. He adjusted the cap in the rearview mirror, at every stop working the angle until the patchwork was partly obscured. I watched the street go by like a procession of little histories, shop windows I've read all my life. Faces that repeat their errands as if repetition itself might keep a day from tipping over. Lila's cottage came into view, small as it had always been, and somehow more theatrical with the garden in full testimony, the late roses strident in the October light, an army of mums arranged by color, sunshine to blood. She met us at the path in a dress that floated when she turned the blonde perfectly blown into soft order, a lacquered brightness that refused to betray her hands which shook. Look at you, she said to me first as if we'd choreographed it. Then to Charles, lighter, careful. You too. Thanks, he said the word short. He avoided her eyes just long enough to make noticing ordinary. Inside the dining room was staged, as if for a magazine's idea of comfort linen runner, 2 small vases of garden cuts, plates mismatched on purpose. The coffee smelled like something a friend tells you to splurge on. I took the chair with the wall behind me. Charles sat to my left. Lila poured and spilled and laughed at the spill. You never spill, I said. I'm practicing, she said. For what? Uncertainty. That was so unlike her, I almost reached for her hand. I didn't. She took the chair across and folded her fingers together like someone praying in a painting. I made your favorite, she said to me, brightening. Cardamom cinnamon rolls, just the right tear. You remember, I said. I remember everything that matters, she said. The barest tremor ran under the sentence. Charles tugged his cap off, forgot himself, and dragged his hand through his hair. It collapsed strangely. Lila looked up and then looked again. She did not blink in time to hide the double take. Are you feeling all right? She asked him, already sorry for asking. Trying a new product, he said. These new shampoos, they soften. Softness is rarely the problem, I said. Structure is the problem. We drank coffee. We pretended to discuss the late frost and the high school's terrible new parking lot. The air felt fizzy, pressurized. Every sentence pinged against the next, like marbles in a bowl. The cinnamon rolls were excellent. My hands were steady on the knife. Charles didn't touch his plate. So I said at last, as if asking after a neighbor this news. Lila's eyes fled to the window where a bee worried a bloom. I thought perhaps. She stopped. Her look slid to Charles and then to me. No, I'll wait. For what I asked. For a better moment, maybe. She tried a smile, it landed and broke. Moments don't like to be scheduled, I said. They prefer to walk in. She took a breath. You're in a mood, she said to me softly. I'm in a chair, I answered. And I am looking at people I know intimately and cannot seem to recognize. She set her cup down with too much care. Evelyn. I found a hair in my shower, Lila, I said. Conversational as a weather report. Long, blonde, not mine. The room made a sound. It might have been Charles's breath. It might have been a hinge. Lila swallowed. You've always had a draft in there, she said. I told you those vents. The vents don't comb, I said. And they don't shed with the sheen of a salon. Color climbed her throat. She pressed her lips together so hard the lipstick reshaped. Her eyes fell to Charles' cap in his lap, and then to the thinness at his temple where his hand had made a path. She reached without meaning to a small appeal she cut short at the wrist. Please don't, I said gently. Don't reach like that. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, the posture of confession or defeat. Avie, he said. Can we? Not here, I said. Here, Lila said, voice shaking. I can't hold the tray and pretend it's not hot. The 3 of us sat in a triangle of history, the table a fourth point, that kept the shape from collapsing. Outside, a car door thumped. Somewhere in the kitchen, a timer beeped, once embarrassed to have misread the room. It was wrong, Lila said suddenly, the words dropping all at once like a basket from a ledge. I know it was wrong. Present tense, I said, is always bolder. I never meant to. She searched the air for the language that would launder a sequence into an accident. I can't make the sentences come out in the right order. The order is very simple, I said. You were lonely. He was lonely in a more complicated way. You found a convenience. She flinched as if I had used a slur. Charles rubbed his brow, making a pale crescent above his eye. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen on him, and older and abruptly younger, like a boy, caught with a pocket full of excuses and no pockets left. I stood. Thank you for the rolls, I said. They were perfect. Evelyn, Lila said, rising halfway. Please. You're shaking, I told her. Sit. Drink your coffee while it's still what you made it. I placed my napkin on the plate the way my mother taught me when she still believed table manners could save a life. I carried my cup to the sink and rinsed it and set it to dry. I felt the habit of finishing a task push me forward. At the door I turned. "Your dress suits you," I said to Lila. "You look as if you earned it." Then I left, letting the door find its latch without a slam. The air outside startled me, bright, honest, cool on the teeth. I walked. I did not hurry. My shoes made a small, consistent sound on the pavement that pleased me. It meant my steps were being counted somewhere. 3 blocks on, I heard him behind me. "Evie, please, Evelyn." His voice was winded, not theatrical. He came up beside me, cap crooked hair beneath it, a scatter of uneven whispers. Up close, I could see what the mirror had suggested. The patches were more pronounced now, and uneven, as if the loss wanted to make a point about maps. "Don't," I said, "not on the sidewalk. Choose your dignity." He chose the curb and kept pace. Hands open, a gesture to show he wasn't hiding anything, and had very little to show. "I need to say it," he said. "You needed to not do it," I said. Saying is always the smaller of the two. "I didn't plan." "You're too old to be surprised by your choices," I said, looking straight ahead. A couple pushing a stroller gave us space the way people do around a domestic weather system, polite, wary, already forgetting. We walked past a hedge cut like a box, past a for sale sign, past a mailbox shaped like a trout. He spoke in pockets, words bumping into each other. "I saw her at Hollander's 2 months ago," he said. "She was crying. The aisle with the cereal of all places. I put a cart between us so she could lean without having to ask for anything. I took her for coffee, just coffee. She laughed about spilling everything but tears. She said she was ashamed of how light her hand felt without a ring. "I know most of this," I said. "You told me in a different grammar. It wasn't meant to be." He stopped, breathed. "I'm a fool for a rescue, Evie. I've always been. You know that. I hated the feeling of being the person who didn't show up when someone fell." "You like the mirror of it," I said. "A rescue is a story with you in the brightest paragraph." "That's cruel," he said. "It's accurate," I said. We reached a corner where the stop sign had a dent like a wound. I turned to face him. The cap shaded his eyes, but I could see them, the soft panic there, the exhausted sweetness that first let him come into my kitchen as if kitchens were permission. "How long?" I asked. He looked away. 7 weeks, he said. "Not the whole time." "There is no fractional integrity," I said. "It doesn't grade on a curve." He winced. "I'm not good with lonely. Hers, mine." "Mine," I said. The words sat between us like something we'd dropped and both refused to pick up. "I love you," he said too quickly, and then again slower, like a password he hoped still worked. "I do." "You love the part of me that steadies the room," I said. "The part that makes your life look like a calendar you can keep." "That's not fair." "It's not flattery either," I said. He scrubbed his crown with the heel of his hand, then flinched when the touch found air where it expected weight. The gesture broke something small in me, not mercy and not delight, something like recognition. We were exactly ourselves finally, and at last I believed the picture. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Not defiant, not even pleading. Just empty, the way a man sounds when he is standing in the wreckage of a story and still cannot name the plot. "Collect your things," I said. "Today, before 6. He blinked as if sunlight had moved. "Evie." "Evelyn," I said. "Evelyn," he repeated as if saying the full name might change its owner. "Please." "You have keys," I said. "Use them to exit." He nodded, a small broken motion. For an instant I saw the left-behind boy in him, and then I saw the man who had taught that boy to keep walking until someone else's doorway looked like a solution. He stepped back. "Is there?" he began and then stopped himself. "I'll come at 5. "Come earlier," I said. "There's less light later." He stood without moving as I walked away. At the next corner I turned and looked back. He was still there, cap off, now the patchwork exposed to the clean day. He looked around as if the neighborhood might offer instructions, a joke, a pity, a ladder. It did what neighborhoods do. It went on being itself. At home I opened the hall closet and pulled his raincoat from the hook, folded it once, laid it by the door. Into a box I put the mug with the ridiculous golfer painted on it, the book on train depots he kept meaning to finish, the slippers he bought for my tile and never wore. I moved methodically, not unkindly. A life can be sorted into piles faster than you expect when you commit to nouns. In the bedroom, the pillows bore the faint memory of his head. I straightened the bedspread. I paused by my vanity and took out the tissue with the blonde strand. I unfolded it and looked. In that moment, without heat, I decided I did not need it anymore. I slid it back, then closed the drawer and left the room. By 4, the hallway held 3 neat stacks. At 4:30, a car door thudded. The key turned. He stepped in with a canvas bag and the look of someone returning library books late. He didn't speak. He lifted the raincoat, folded it again, though it did not need folding, placed it gently on top of the box. He hesitated at the mug. "This was a bad joke," he said. "I never liked it." "It can learn to like a donation bin," I said. He gave a breath that might have been a laugh if it had remembered how. He carried 2 boxes out and came back for the last one. At the threshold he turned. "Evelyn," he said, "you could—" "No," I said. He closed his eyes once. When he opened them, they were just eyes, brown and uncertain and human. He nodded and went. After the door shut, the condo sounded larger. Not empty, only properly proportioned. In the kitchen, I washed the coffee cup I had not used that day and turned it upside down on the rack. I opened the window over the sink. The air came in polite and clear. In the guest bath, the bottle stood unremarkable, leaning its habitual millimeter. I lifted it, weighed it, set it down. In the mirror, I saw my face and the line my mouth makes when I have done exactly what I meant to do. I ran the water until it was warm and turned it off. The pipes went quiet the way a stage goes quiet after a curtain. I folded the towel edge to edge and smoothed the stripe. Then I went to the living room, sat at the table, and pulled the crossword toward me. 7 across waited unapologetic. I printed a word that fit and did not please me. I erased it. I filled another that was slightly worse. I left the squares empty and moved to the down clues letter by letter, letting the crossings do their quiet adjudicating. At 5:50 the key turned again. He set a small box just inside the one he had forgotten, the razor, the spare brush, a paperback he'd borrowed. He lifted a hand in a half-wave and lowered it. "There's a hat in the hall closet," he said. "I used to wear it when the sun was too blunt. You liked it once." "It's yours," I said. "It looks better on your peg," he said, and then he went without waiting to be right. I stood a long moment in the doorway, after the elevator swallowed him, the building's mechanical heart, humming all the patient sounds of ordinary days. I shut the door and flipped the lock and set the chain. The muscles of the house relaxed. In the kitchen, the tulip had opened itself into a little yellow sunburst, far too big for a juice glass. I moved it to a taller vase and added water until the stem was satisfied. The first swallow it took was visible a tiny, "He left the hat." I hung it back on the peg because the empty hook looked like a missing tooth. The condo settled into its measured sounds, the refrigerator's discreet breath, a neighbor's laugh rising through the ductwork and thinning into air. I washed my hands without needing to and set the towel square on its bar. At 6:04, the doorbell rang. Lila stood on the landing with wind-reddened cheeks and hair that had surrendered its salon obedience to the day's gusts. She looked both put together and slightly unbuttoned, as if she had dressed for one kind of conversation and walked into another. I opened the door enough for the chain to show, then slipped it free. "Evelyn," she said. Her voice had the rasp of someone who'd rehearsed lines and burned them on the way over. "I'm sorry to come unannounced." "You always knock like you mean it," I said, stepping aside. She blinked at the ordinary word and nodded. In the kitchen, I set out the good cups, the bone-white ones with the faint ring of ivy my sister calls funeral china. Steam lifted from the kettle. I measured Earl Grey as if precision could govern anything beyond a cup. Lila sat forward on the edge of the sofa, hands bridged foot tapping a faint, unruly rhythm into the rug. I handed her a cup. She didn't drink. "How long?" I asked. 6 weeks, she said. The words fell cleanly, no arguments attending them. "Not the whole time." "That math never helps," I said. She flinched. "I know." A breath. "Evelyn, She stopped and reorganized the furniture of her face. The day it began, I had just signed the last papers. I walked out of the courthouse and couldn't tell whether I was lighter or gone. I went to Hollander's because I always go to Hollander's. I stared at a wall of cereal as if the right combination of grains would tell me who I was. I started to cry ridiculous quietly at first, and then in that ugly way you hear yourself and hate your own throat. "I'm familiar with the aisle," I said. "He pressed a cart between us so I could hold something," she said. He didn't say, "What's wrong?" He said, "Take your time." We sat in his car with the doors open like we were waiting for weather. I talked about nothing brave: electric bills, the black mold in my shower, the way the house ticks at night. He didn't try to fix any of it. He just didn't leave. "You wanted a person-shaped pause," I said. "I wanted relief," she said, eyes flashing like a defense and then cooling into admission. "I wanted to feel chosen without having to negotiate for the verb." The first time I made him coffee, I told myself it was gratitude. The second time, I told myself we were adults who could be kind to one another without paperwork. By the third, she shut her eyes. I kept thinking I'd stop at the next exit. I set my cup down and still arrived here. "Yes." She looked around my living room as if the objects might testify. "I dressed for church to come to your door," she said, wincing at herself. "Isn't that stupid?" "It's familiar," I said. The clock in the hall clicked its small insistence. Lila's gaze snagged on the hat at the peg, the brim shadowing the wall. She folded one hand over the other until the knuckles blanched. "He told me today that he loves you," she said. "He likes being steadied," I said. "Love is the word he uses for that when it works." She swallowed. "He ended it," she said, voice thin. "He said he needs to try to make things right." "With me," I said. "He didn't use your name," she whispered, ashamed for him. "He said where I belong," and I wanted to hit him for the certainty of that. I moved to the window and lifted the blind with 2 fingers. The street admitted evening in blue strips. Down the block, a man taught a child to ride a bicycle, running alongside, with a hand at the small of the back, until his legs declared themselves finished, and the child wobbled like hope and kept going. I let the blind fall. You didn't come for permission, I said. No, Leela said. I came in to return a key you never gave me. She reached into her bag and placed a small brass key on the coffee table. 41 years, she said, smiling without humor. We've shared codes to houses' alarms recipes. This one I stole. I should have asked. I should have told you when I changed the color on my head and the temperature in my life. You were afraid of my face, I said. I was afraid of myself inside your face, she said. I didn't want to hear the sentence I had already written. We sat with that. The tea cooled into a perfume of bergamot. In the mirror above the sideboard, our reflection looked like a painting of women whose hands have been told for once to be still. Lila stopped, then reached anyway, fingertips to the rim of her cup, the way a person touches an instrument before deciding whether they still know how to play. I can tell you it was loneliness, and you can believe me, she said. I can tell you it was vanity, and you can believe that too. The blonde was a dare I placed on my own head. I thought if I changed the light around my face, I could change what the face needed. It changed what it attracted, I said. She nodded, took the smallest sip, and set the cup down as if the saucer might bruise. You will hate me for a while, she said, maybe longer. I don't know that word with you, I said. I know removal. I know distance that refuses spectacle. She understood. Her mouth trembled and then held. Will we ever... She stopped herself. I don't deserve the future tense. That's tidy, I said, but this isn't tidy. She stood because her body needed something to do. She smoothed her dress where no wrinkle lived. She looked at the hat again and then at me. Thank you for letting me in, she said. You knocked, I said. That's still a language, I answer. At the door she turned. For a heartbeat, I saw the girl who showed me how to pin up hair for summer without losing the part, the new mother who called me at 3 a.m. to say the baby would only sleep on her chest, the widow who stood with me at the sink washing dishes with our coats on while the house thawed. Then the day drew its line. She stepped over it and was gone. I rinsed the cups and dried them and put them back into their slots as if returning instruments to a case. Then I sat at the dining table with a yellow legal pad and a pen that writes like it means to. I wrote Call Harper & Lowe and underlined it. The firm had handled Daniel's estate and mine in the uncomplicated years. I dialed from memory. A receptionist with a Sunday school voice placed me on hold. Violins attempted comfort. Ms. Hart said Richard Lowe when the music clicked off. He had the lawyer's trick of sounding like a friend you never have to forgive. What can I do for you? I need to amend my will, I said. Of course, scope. I want to remove Lila Monroe as successor executor and beneficiary, I said. The words felt like heavy items set in the right box. Understood, he said. A crisp pen sound on his end. And substitute parties. The Harborview Widow Support Fund, I said. All personal property and the remainder after specific gifts. We'll need their EIN and mailing address, he said. Any specific bequests to family. Nothing changes there, I said. But add the Hart Library Fund at the community center, $5,000, to replenish the large print shelves. Noted, he said. I can have drafts by Thursday. We'll need witnesses for signatures. I'll come in, I said. He paused. I'm sorry for whatever has necessitated this, he said. Not fishing, not prying, just placing a hand on the table without touching. It's housekeeping, I said. I'm clearing surfaces. We are very good dusters, he said, and we ended the call. The condo offered back its usual decent silence. I opened the desk drawer where I keep small obediences, stamps, envelopes, the notebook, where I track thank you notes and fruitcakes at Christmas. I wrote Harborview an email asking for their tax information and hesitated before the salutation, choosing Dear Ms. Patel because she had spoken at the center last spring about the shapes grief takes when it thinks no one is looking. Then I shut the laptop and sat very still. At 9:15, my phone lit with Lila's name. I let it ring twice and then answered. Don't hang up, she said. Please don't hang up. I won't, I said. He told me he tried to fix it, she said. He told me he packed carefully and left the hat. He left more than that, I said. I know, she said. The breath on the line hitched and righted itself. I don't want you to say you forgive me tonight. I wouldn't know what to do with it. I wanted you to hear me tell you that I am ashamed. I heard you, I said, earlier. That was explanation, she said. This is inventory. We were quiet together. From the street came the distant hoot of teenagers who trusted darkness to hide their delight. A motorcycle stitched a seam of sound and unpicked it at the corner. I won't call again, she said, unless you do. You won't, I agreed. Good night, Evie, she said, using a name I hadn't let anyone use in years, and then flinching at her own reflex. Evelyn. Good night. Good night, I said, and set the phone face down. I turned off lamps until the rooms became shapes again. In the bedroom, I placed a fresh glass of water on the nightstand, the way I always do, though I rarely drink it. I switched off the light and lay on my side, listening to the building breathe. Somewhere above, a neighbor practiced scales on a piano, slow, sincere, one hand at a time. I counted the notes until counting stopped being necessary. The hat on the peg kept the hallway company. The night minded its own work. Morning collected itself along the window ledge, a thin bar of pewter brightening to tin. I brewed coffee and signed the engagement letter Richard had emailed overnight. Witnesses would meet me at the firm on Thursday. Paper moves like weather when it wants to. At 11, the bell rang again. I knew the shape of the silence on the other side before I opened the door. Charles stood there with a grocery bouquet dressed in cellophane, the kind of flowers that make their own rain. The cap was off. The thinning had advanced into an awkward geometry, paler splotches against silver hair lying where it could and refusing where it couldn't. "I look ridiculous," he said, holding the bouquet as if it might apologize for being loud. "Yes," I said, "you do." He glanced past me as if my hallway might reconsider him. "Barber says it may not come back properly, something about the follicles, chemical interference." He sounded very kind while saying permanently. "That was good of him," I said. He swallowed. "Do you feel he changed direction?" "I think I'm supposed to say I'm sorry." "You are," I said, and saying it doesn't lift anything from my side of the table. He stepped forward, stopped at the threshold. "I made a mess, and I want to clean it." "You're better at tidying than cleaning," I said. "This is not crumbs." A muscle in his cheek tried to become a smile and gave up. He set the flowers on the console and put both hands in his pockets like a contrite boy memorizing his lines. "Tell me what to do," he said. "I did," I said, "yesterday." "More than that." "There isn't more," I said. He stood in it, no angles to lean against. After a long moment he nodded, eyes fixed on the wood grain of my floor, seeing a map no one else could read. "I'll bring back your spare key," he said. "That would be appropriate." He reached for the bouquet, thought better, and left it where it was. When he turned to go, he looked smaller. The hallway light gave his scalp a faint halo that had nothing to do with virtues and everything to do with angles. The door closed with a clean click that sounded almost practiced. By Thursday, the new documents were ready. At Harper & Lowe, the conference room smelled faintly of lemon oil and law school. Richard read the changes aloud without editorial. 2 clerks signed in the right slots. I dated and initialed in the small, relentless boxes. When we were done, he slid a copy into a folder and aligned it with the table's seam. "You've kept things clear," he said. "I prefer surfaces I can see," I said. Outside late leaves did their last work in the wind. I walked to the Harborview Center and handed Miss Patel the letter confirming what the paperwork would mean when paperwork becomes fact. She pressed my hand as if pressing a seal. In the lobby, 2 women argued tenderly about whether grief makes you taller or only straighter for a while. The elevator doors opened on their reflection and closed again. Weeks settled into their shapes. Quiet has its own calendar. The day the refrigerator hums starts to sound like company. The afternoon, the hat on the peg becomes a sight rather than a signal. The evening, you realize the television has been off long enough to feel like choice. I learned which neighbor plays the cello and which one cooks with cumin. I folded his last receipt into the drawer with my warranties and then unfolded it and threw it away. I slept, then didn't, then did again. 6 months later, the for sale sign went into the patch of grass outside my building, and a young couple point-counted outlets like birders. Offers arrived with the efficiency of a season arriving. I signed on a Tuesday in April in a real estate office that smelled of earnest coffee and new carpet. The check surprised me. Neighborhoods change the way faces do slowly until suddenly. "Congratulations," said Linda, the agent with the tidy bob and insurance against weather. She slid documents across the desk like a magician revealing an honest trick. "Cash, no contingencies." "Efficient," I said. My hand made a neat, familiar signature in all the right places. Paperwork admits so many exits if you look for them. The door chimed and Lila walked in. Time had rewritten the blonde into a paler compromise, dark roots rehearsing a return. She looked at once careful and undone, as if her life were a dress being taken in at the sides while she stood in it. "I heard you were signing," she said, not asking permission to know. "I wanted to wish you well." "Thank you," I said. I placed the pen at the top of the folder, centered. She studied my face as if an answer might be written there in a script she used to read easily. "How are you?" she asked, simple and scraped. "Functional," I said. She nodded. "He's in the hospital," she said, because the sentence had to land somewhere. "Prostate. Surgery went well. He asked for you." I imagine he did. She flinched at the coolness and then accepted it the way people accept the exact temperature of water when they sink their hands into a sink. "We haven't spoken since your door," she added, spare and unembroidered. "I tried and then didn't." "You kept your word," I said. "I managed it," she said. Linda returned with a small stack of keys and a larger smile. Papers were exchanged. The young couple was arriving in an hour to take celebratory photos, the kind you frame until you stop recognizing the 2 people the frame insists you are. Lila stepped aside for the business of it, hands clasped. When Linda drifted toward the copier, she moved closer. I don't know how to square 41 years, she said low. I keep finding them in my pockets. They're not missing, I said. They're not available either. She closed her eyes once as if the lids needed to practice. All right. We left together as far as the sidewalk. Spring had put a shine on the street. A woman balanced a cake box on one palm like Grace class. A child in a yellow coat told a scooter how fast it was allowed to go. Lila turned to me with the look she wears when she changes the water for Tulip's practical reverence. If you need help packing, I can... She stopped herself. I know. I've kept the boxes light, I said. She smiled thin and true. Of course you have. After a breath, goodbye, Evelyn. She said my name whole, not the nickname that belonged to a different weather. Goodbye, Layla, I said. We stood 1 second longer than two polite women on a sidewalk usually stand, and then the street pulled us into separate currents. I walked to the corner and waited for the light and crossed when it said so. The condo looked like a stranger you already trust. The rooms had thinned themselves for travel books and labeled cartons, the desk cleared to a clean topography, the kitchen dignified by absence. On the table sat the keys Linda had returned for the final walkthrough, and a single envelope from the cruise line with times in bold, and a map that made oceans look like something designed rather than suffered. I set the envelope under a paperweight and opened the window. By late afternoon, the sky poured a rinsed light over the buildings. I carried a last box to the hall and taped it shut, while the tape still obeyed. The hat remained on its peg. It had become, over months, an object separate from its history, a brim shading paint, a curve easing a vertical line. I lifted it down and ran a thumb along the band. The felt had kept the shape of a head, whether a head was there or not. I set it on the entry table, not as a token, not as a threat, only as a thing that no longer belonged to a door. The kettle rattled once and settled. I made tea in the funeral china and drank it at the window. A breeze moved the tulip in its vase. The waterline dropped a mark. Across the street the cello began. Again slow scales a human animal trying to line its breath with something steadier than breath. When the cup was empty, I washed it and dried it and slid it into its ring in the cupboard. I turned the dimmer and let the room arrange itself into edges and shadows I knew. I checked the locks and placed the keys in a straight, honest row on the counter. In the bedroom, the suitcase stood open-closed, folded like sentences that knew where they were going. I closed the case and clicked the latches. At the door I paused, not at the threshold of a thought, but at wood and metal and the habit of looking back. I did once. The rooms held still. They had made their own peace with each other and did not require mine. I switched off the hall light, lifted the handle, and stepped into the corridor with the soft finality of someone completing a form exactly as intended. The elevator opened promptly. Inside the mirror doubled an ordinary woman with a small suitcase and a neat mouth. I watched myself descend floor by measured floor, a simple arithmetic, and when the doors parted at the lobby, I walked into the evening and the clean air lifted the hair at my temple the way a hand once did long ago before it learned to be steady on its own. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.